Spider-Man is my favorite hero of fiction. So when I'm down in my secret lounge, you know that the Spider-Man display takes center stage. We are going to look at every single one of the shelves in my Spider-Man display. Let's get to it. Hey y'all, welcome back to Carbon Scoring, the best place for comics, history, and action figures. I am down in my secret lounge, my storage display room of all of my favorite action figures of all time. Everything from G.I. Joe to Transformers, but most especially Spider-Man. Right in the center of the room is where I keep all of my Spideys. And we're gonna go piece by piece through this, taking a look at what I consider some of the best Spider-Man figures of all time. Starting up here on the top shelf, we have what I consider my Spider-Man island of misfit toys. These are the ones that really just don't fit in with the rest of the 6-inch display everywhere else, but they certainly are deserving of having a place in my collection. And right up front is the Hot Toys Classic Suit Spider-Man. So this is a video game figure. It's meant to be from the, I think, PlayStation series, and there's a couple of other ones in this series that I have, but this is such a classic representation of red and blue Spidey that I felt like it needed to be right up front. Just to his side is the Gamerverse Hot Toys version of Spidey 2099. I love how metallic this guy turned out. Both the blue and the red really capture that metallic look of the game. Such an impressive feat to get that figure looking just like it does. And then next to him is the Parker Industries, I want to say like Mark V suit. Again, it's very similar to a classic suit, but it has those Alex Ross touches, the slightly green eyes, the glowing incandescent webs, and of course he's got the web shooter shooting out. So another cool look, and one that I thought was actually pretty good until I got the true classic. Now back in the back comes the 1977 Remco electronic Spider-Man. This was not a figure that I had as a kid, but it was one that I always wanted. He has a web shooter up by his hand, and he's got an electronic feature so that he can actually crawl along the web. Not only did they make Spider-Man, they made a Green Goblin of this as well, which I actually have that one also. Down in front of him are reproduction Mego figures. Now, the Mego Spider-Man is one of the most classic figures of the 1970s, and this version actually contains the circle web suit that was the very first release. Now, I actually do have an original circle web suit, but it's not here on display. This one is a later reproduction, but what I've added to it is a custom Steve Ditko head. So I actually painted that head, I did all of the artwork on it, added it to the Mego body, and I think it comes out with a really nice 60s Spider-Man. Next to him is a reproduction of what is truly one of the holy grails remaining out in my collection, and that is the Mego Secret Identity Peter Parker figure. That's one that I don't have. Montgomery Ward's sold Secret Identity clothing outfits that fit the 1970s Mego's World's Greatest Superheroes figures. They did Bruce Wayne, Dick Grayson, Clark Kent, and Peter Parker. Now, this isn't exactly what the clothing looks like on the Montgomery Ward exclusive Peter Parker, but it's close, and it certainly gives us a pretty reasonable Peter. One time on eBay in the 1990s, somebody showed a completed auction where they bought just random assorted doll clothes still in package. Yeah, it was the Secret Identities figure, and they got all 4 of them for under $5. Still the greatest eBay find I've ever seen. And next to him, I don't collect a lot of Pops, but if you're going to go with the bombastic Bagman, he has got to find a way in my collection. We'll see more of the Bagman later on as we go down through the other displays. Coming across one of my favorite collections, and one that came out long before Pops, were Mighty Mugs. These super deformed, big-headed, round-bodied figures just were so much fun. And I got every Spider-Man they made. Of course, they made the classic red and blue and the classic black suit, a really good-looking black suit Spider-Man. But I believe as a San Diego Comic-Con exclusive, you got this split-faced Peter Parker Spider-Man mask. And again, this goes back to the early days of Spider-Man. This is a very Steve Ditko look with the glasses on Peter and the split mask. The rumor was that Stan Lee wanted less Peter Parker and more Spider-Man in the book, and so this was Steve Ditko's way of accomplishing both of those things. But they look super awesome as my Mighty Mugs collection. Now, right next to the classic red and blue Spidey is this Metacom black suit Spider-Man. This was a Japanese import, and you can see how crazy the proportions are. If you look down here, look at how long and angular those feet are and how crazy and long those tapered fingers are. This is such a great representation of the Todd McFarlane era with the black suit. I absolutely love it. And its sister figure is right here, the red and blue. Again, I think you can get a look at that crazy Todd McFarlane head. You can see those incredibly long, sort of super exaggerated fingers and feet. And it's just an absolutely beautiful piece from the late 90s. A little more recently, Hano Toys has started releasing a quote-unquote budget line of 12-inch figures in their Hot Toys line called Hano Studios. And this is the black suit Spider-Man. I really like the web effects on this one. You can see the web coming out of the top of his web shooter and, of course, standing up here on his head. So really, really nice. Back in the back is the Mego 12-inch super articulated Spider-Man, again from the 1970s. And a really cool piece hiding way back in the back is this 14-inch vinyl Spider-Man. Actually, my high school girlfriend gave this to me when we were both like 16 years old, and I've had it ever since. It's not very articulated. It's just kind of a soft vinyl piece, but it definitely represents that John Romita style. So you can see the Island of Misfit Spideys definitely has a ton of different figures associated with it, and every single one of them is unique. Spider-Man has the greatest rogues gallery in all of comics, and I will fight every single one of you Batman and Flash fans to the death about that. And when we talk about Spidey villains, you've got the A-list villains, the B-list villains, but these on this shelf, yeah, this is the S tier, because every single one of these villains were created by Spidey's co-creator, Steve Ditko. All of these appeared in the first 36 issues of Amazing Spider-Man. So let's start left to right and work our way across, beginning with a custom figure of the Crime Master, a criminally underutilized criminal. I got this custom probably 15 years ago. I actually own an original piece of Spider-Man art that features the Crime Master by Steve Ditko, so that one always has a special place in my heart. One of my first customs that was provided to me by a fan of the channel, the J. Jonah Jameson Spider Slayer from issue 25 of Amazing Spider-Man, with all those kooky tendrils and JJ's face right there in the metal dome. Such a cool figure. And then this is the Walmart exclusive Lizard. Here you can see Kirk Connors in his earliest form. He looks much more like the way that Steve Ditko drew him, with that more lizard, almost animated style face, but definitely a great figure and representative of the Ditko time frame. Same thing goes for Kraven the Hunter. Kraven came a little bit later. He debuted in the teens of Amazing Spider-Man, but a beautiful figure. This, I believe, is the cartoon version. Really super cool. Another custom of the Molten Man. Now, we actually did get a Molten Man in the Amazon exclusive like 5-pack, but I still think this custom with its brilliant metallic paint job actually looks better than the one that we got. Mysterio, very, very Ditko look with the color scheme of his green, purple, and that sweet translucent dome. Such a great figure. Had to go back to the Toy Biz line for this Sandman. Sandman came out in the Spider-Man Classics line, and the sculpting of this one, the texture of his body is still superior to any of the Hasbro figures that we've gotten. Same can be said for the Vulture back in the back. The Vulture was the first true supervillain that Spider-Man ever faced, battling with him in issue 2 of Amazing Spider-Man, a classic tale of youth versus experience, the Toy Biz Fearsome Foes 5-pack is where that figure came from. Now, arguably Spidey's longest standing enemy, J. Jonah Jameson, the publisher of the Daily Bugle. Here he comes in the retro cardback series. I love the dynamic look. I love that snarl on his face and that pointing figure. Such a great look. But if there was one villain that was the greatest in all of Spidey's Rogues Gallery, it would have to be the Green Goblin. Making his appearance in Amazing Spider-Man 14 under the pen of Steve Ditko, this figure actually really looks like the artwork of John Romita Sr., who took the book to new artistic heights when he took over with issue 37, which actually unmasked the Green Goblin as Norman Osborn. Now, one of Spidey's greatest and longest standing villains is none other than Otto Octavius, Doc Ock himself. And while Hasbro has given us quite a few Doc Ock figures, none of them hold a candle to this Mezco 112 figure with its bendy wire tail, its cloth costume, and its classic stylings, all complete with that incredible bowl cut. This is the best classic Doc Ock we've ever gotten. Back in the back, you have another of Spidey's first foes appearing all the way back in Amazing Spider-Man issue 1, and it's the Chameleon. Now, I'd love to see a more classic Chameleon. This is much more of a modern one in the suit, but he still fits in with our Ditko villains. Just like Max Dillon, Electro. Love this with the electric effects coming off his fingers and that crazy electronic starfish right on his head. Such great expression on this one. Just a really, really solid figure. The animated line and the retro card back gave us another winner with the Scorpion here in almost a Ditko look. He would need to have his mouth guard, his face covered, his mouth covered to really be a true Ditko, but I still think that it works the best for them. And then we round out this collection with 4 more customs. We have got not the Crime Master, we have Frederick Foswell as the Big Man and the Enforcers, Fancy Dan, Montana, and Ox. Those are some of the best looking customs that I have. They fit perfectly in with the rest of the display. And those are your Ditko villains. Definitely the S tier of all of Spidey's bad guys. Now we come to one of my favorite Spidey shelves. I'll grant you, it's one of the busiest ones, but there's just so much good stuff in here. This is the home of my 5-inch Spidey collection, as well as some more of those oddities and oddballs that just don't fit in anywhere else. Let's start back here in the back. When Toy Biz was doing Spider-Man animated figures, they made some absolutely incredible ones, beginning with this amazing Man Spider figure. This figure was so good that it was one of the initial figures in the Spider-Man Classics line when they converted over to 6-inch. Next to that is a body that they used repeatedly. Here is the classic red and blue version of Spider-Man. Next to him, you can see that same body as Scarlet Spider, and here is that body as Spider-Man 2099. It's just such a classic fit for Spidey. They were able to use it across numerous figures. Man Spider actually came from the 6-armed Spider-Man, and if you guys remember how crappy that relatively recent Marvel Legends 6-armed Spider-Man is, you'll see just how spectacular this one is with nicely articulated arms up and down its torso. Right before the end of the 5-inch line, Toy Biz did some really cool things with Spider-Man, particularly with these 2 Spideys. One that's like a sweatshirt ravaged Spidey with his suit underneath. You can see his torn blue jeans, ripped up sweatshirt over jacket. And then here is a Peter Parker with that classic half Spidey, half Peter head. Love it. Love the blue jeans. Love the press pass in his pocket. Granted, some of the proportions are a little wonky like those arms, but it's still a super cool figure. And rocking the back is the Spider-Sense Spider-Man, one of my absolute favorite Spideys of all time. This one based on the artwork of Mike Wieringo. Such a cool piece. Coming across here is a Diamond Select comic shop exclusive Spidey that has the McFarlane body, but then a John Romita Sr. head. And then you've got that classic body for Spectacular Spider-Man, the Ben Reilly version. You've got a Peter head, you've got a cyborg Spider-Man, and you've even got the brief period of time where Spidey had the Captain Universe powers. It gets even more fun with the 1967 model Spider-Man. These were simply like plastic model kits that came out in the 60s. You could color them yourself. Medicom, before Mini-Mates, was making little tiny figures. And then this Peter is actually a McDonald's Happy Meal toy where his chest flips up and you get a full Spider-Man suit. But in that look, you get the half Spidey, just the way we like it. Coming back across, another Medicom figure. This one, I believe, was actually from the Tobey Maguire movies, is what that's supposed to be. But over in the corner, you have my collection of the bombastic Bagman. Yes, there is the 6-inch Marvel Legends Bagman, and here is the one from the Marvel Legends 3 3/4 inch series, both of them with the classic Fantastic Four suit and the bag. I think I stuck a Kick Me sign on the back of this one. I made one, but the other one actually came with one. Negative Zone Spider-Man, very difficult to find, paint exclusive. I actually picked that up at Target in Gainesville, Florida. And next to him, the Amazing Fantasy 15 Spider-Man Classics figure with some custom web wings that I put in there. This is the 5-inch Spider-Girl, another Diamond Select comic shop exclusive. I think that's a Hero Clicks. And then you get into my collection of Peter Porker, the Spectacular Spider-Ham. I have tried to pick up virtually every version of Peter Porker available, whether it be a Hero Clicks, whether it be the Marvel Legend, whether it be a Kids Toys. This one in the middle of the screen is actually from Diamond Select. I love that one. I think that's one of the most accurate comic ones. There's even a Lego Peter Porker. There's a couple of smaller ones. And then these, the black suit and the red suit, are Japanese Medicom exclusive blind bag Peter Porkers. Really, really cool. There is my original Secret Wars Spider-Man. You can see I've rubbed virtually all of the paint off of him. Behind him, a John Romita Jr. version of Spidey, and one of the first super articulated Spideys that came out in the Marvel Superheroes line in the late 90s. Again, Spider-Man Classics figures of the different characters. There's 2099 and Scarlet Spider, and the classic Spider-Man Classics, the first figure from the wave, the figure that really brought about Marvel Legends, and the black suit version of it. This super articulated Spider-Man came from the Spider-Man animated series, so it actually came out after this figure did. This one here in the middle, that came in the Marvel Superheroes line. This was the upgrade super articulated figure in the Spider-Man animated series. Another of my all-time favorites, the McDonald's Happy Meal Spider-Man animated figure. And next to that, a new gem that I found. This came from like a construction playset that also had Batman and the Hulk from like the late 70s. It is such a crazy piece, and it just captures that crazy 70s aesthetic. We got a Mini-Mate Peter Parker. We've got the Marvel Retro Legends Spidey, and another one of those super articulated, both blue and black versions. I love this symbiote half suit Spider-Man, where you can see the symbiote costume taking over right next to a battle ravaged Spidey. And to its left, our right, that is a die-cast metal Mego Spider-Man from the late 70s. Very, very heavy, very cool piece. Spider-Sense Spider-Man from the animated series. And then we get into some of Spidey's leading ladies, both Mary Jane Watson and Gwen Stacy. We've got different versions of all of them. There's a couple of more MJs she managed to get in the 3 3/4 line, including Mrs. Lion, Aunt May's dog. There's 2 versions of her, and even a Lego MJ down there. These 2 figures, this first one is another Mego figure from the Pocket Superheroes line, and then this is the first of Toy Biz's Spider-Man figures from the Marvel Superheroes line. He's got the suction cup hands and that kind of barrel-chested body. So many fun figures on this shelf. I just love these. You could take out all the Ditko villains, and this shelf would still rival anyone's rogues gallery in the history of comics. These are what I consider the A-list of Spidey villains. And of course, it all begins with Eddie Brock and Venom. Now, we have gotten a bunch of Venom figures over the years, but I choose this one that really represents his classic look from his very first appearances in Amazing Spider-Man 299 and 300, as drawn by his co-creator, Todd McFarlane. We hadn't yet entered the era of the giant lashing tongue. This was still just the big smiling face, big huge-eyed Venom. Not quite the monstrous proportions that he would become later. So for me, this is my origin Venom and the one that I absolutely prefer. Here, we have got the incredible Rhino, who is probably the greatest villain designed by John Romita Sr., the second artist on Amazing Spider-Man. The other one that would compete for that role would be the Kingpin, Wilson Fisk, seen here with his cravat, his diamond-handled cane, and his absolutely gorgeous purple pants. Now, as we continue on in the 1970s, no one caused more havoc for our wall crawler than the Jackal. Yes, this was one of Peter's college professors who was so obsessed with Gwen Stacy that he actually cloned her and Spider-Man. That clone of Spider-Man would go on to become Ben Reilly and create unbelievable distress throughout the entire 1990s in the books. Another 70s creation, the Shocker. Yep, the quilted one in all of his glory. I think I actually did kind of fill in the black lines on this to really help bring him out and make him look a lot better. One of the more powerful and distinguished villains of the 2000s is Morlun. This was a character that was introduced during Michael J. Straczynski's run on the title, someone who had a power set far greater than Peter Parker and tied into the origins of Spider-Man in a different way. J. Michael Straczynski kind of took things in a whole new direction, and Morlun was a key part of that. Another vampiric figure, but one from the early days of the change in the comics code, is Mobius. So cool. This is the kind of classic comic version, not the one that you've seen on the big screen, but a really, really cool figure. And from the Clone Saga, the first failed clone of Peter Parker, later to be known as Kane. So excited that we've actually gotten this in a 6-inch Marvel Legends figure. Back on our back row, Tarantula, another very cool design from the 70s, and the Prowler, Hobie Brown. The rumor is that this figure was actually designed initially by John Romita Jr. when he was a teenager, and that his father then used him in the books. You can see a lot of the inspiration for Spawn came from this figure. Not an enemy, but one of Spidey's allies, Jessica Drew Spider-Woman, and a classic Beetle. Very cool, one of the early figures. Now, the first villain that I ever read about, the bad guy in my very first Spider-Man comic book, Amazing Spider-Man 250, was none other than the Hobgoblin. Now, the Hobgoblin saga was maybe the highlight of 1980s Spider-Man books, and it just really was captivating because unlike the crazed Norman Osborn, the Hobgoblin had all of the same powers, but a keen intellect and incredible strategy. It made him a very fearsome foe. Moving into the 90s, you have what has become kind of the caricature of the age of excess in comics, and that's Cletus Cassidy Carnage. Not my favorite character, but I do love that head sculpt and felt like he had to be included. Another of Spidey's allies, this time the Jessica Carpenter, Jessica Drew, Jennifer Carpenter, Julia Carpenter. This is the Julia Carpenter Spider-Woman, and I got to admit, I always had kind of a crush on the artwork of that figure. Up in the corner, I have my little homage to the era of Tom DeFalco and Ron Frenz, one of my favorite times on the Spidey books, and 3 characters that they co-created together, beginning with the Silver Sable, Puma, and a new addition to Spidey's Rogues Gallery, another gangster, the Rose. Finally coming down here, you have the Black Cat, and I tried to pick the one that had her in her most classic look, and a custom of Madam Web, a figure that we so desperately need in the Marvel Legends 6-inch line. So here we go with Spidey's A-list. But now we get to the really fun ones. These are the final set of Spidey villains. And yeah, some of these are B-list, some of these are D-list, and some of these are just outright ridiculous. But this is what makes Spidey comics as fun as they are. You've got gangsters, you've got goofballs, you've got legacy characters, and you've got really what's honestly a Daredevil bad guy in Stiltman, but he just wouldn't fit anywhere else. I do love this Stiltman figure. Here he is on his extending legs, just really cool. Should be in a Daredevil display, but Daredevil doesn't have quite enough to get his own full display. Demogoblin is another of the Goblin legacy. I love that flaming glider that he has and his tattered look. We saw the original Beetle. Here is Janice Lincoln, the new Beetle, the daughter of Tombstone. Speaking of Tombstone, he is actually sneaking over here with some other mobsters. So this is kind of a classic comic Tombstone. We have gotten him in a tuxedo, but I kind of love him in his kind of street jacket. And he's joined by two other classic mobsters, Silvermane and Hammerhead. Look at how great those three guys look together. I mentioned legacy characters. Here is the new Electro. I'm trying to remember her name, but she is a super cool character, and I love those electric effects. And Ben Urich, the nephew of Daily Bugle writer. Ben Urich is the Daily Bugle writer. This is Phil Urich, the nephew of Ben Urich as the Hobgoblin. One of the greatest additions from the Villains box set was the Fly. The first time I encountered the Fly was in a Peter Parker, the Spectacular Spider-Man issue that was Assistant Editors Month and was drawn by the great cartoonist Fred Hembeck. Such a cool memory. And then this is Hydro-Man, and Hydro-Man has an incredibly Todd McFarlane looking head sculpt. Hydro-Man did appear during McFarlane's run on the book, and that one classically represents that. Spinning back around, some great figures here. Mr. Negative, a newer addition to Spidey's Rogues Gallery, and some of his goons. I was able to pick up multiple packs of this because each Mr. Negative came with these three different head sculpts, and together they make a pretty sweet looking Yakuza-esque sort of mob background. Paladin is kind of one of those doofy bad guys. It's not the greatest figure, but at least it exists. And then I have a custom of Cardiac. Now, Cardiac was just announced on the retro card back. It looks great. It's gonna have to be great to overtake the place that this custom has in my display. A custom that's not so good, but definitely could use an upgrade is the Spot. Probably I could actually go in there and fill in some of those spots a little bit better. But one of the zaniest characters, somebody who actually did just get an upgrade in the Magic the Gathering set, is Man-Wolf. And this is actually John Jameson, J. Jonah Jameson's son, after he found that mysterious ruby that you see right there on his neck on one of his missions to space. He became like a space vampire. The fact that I have had this figure for going on 15 years is utterly terrific. A couple of other kind of sometimes good, sometimes bad guys, Boomerang and Speed Demon. But I really love our people right here in front. Razorback, who I actually think is more of a good guy than a bad guy. And then the Mortiest of the Morts, perhaps two of the best action figures of all time, of two of the most just terrible characters of all time, Frogman and White Rabbit, center the display of the rest of the Spidey villains. It is hard to argue that Across the Spider-Verse is not the best version of Spider-Man ever placed on film. And because it was such a great movie, it deserves an equally great display. Perhaps the most dynamic display in my entire collection is my Spider-Verse display. The use of flight stands, different levels, swinging characters, flying characters, rockin' and rollin' characters, Japanese toys. everything that you could possibly want is all found right here across the Spider-Verse. So let's start over in the corner with the Peter B. Parker, or the Peter Parker from Miles' world. This is the Sentinel figure with the Peter Parker head. And then I've got a custom Spectacular Spider-Man head on this Mafex body. Spectacular Spider-Man did appear in Across the Spider-Verse. That is undoubtedly the best Spider-Man cartoon, and so he had to make a glowing appearance in this display. SPDR, the kid's toy, is in the back, and you've got Captain Britain Spider-Man, you've got the Cyborg Spider-Man, and the Captain Universe Spider-Man. Even Spider-Boy, who has yet to appear in the Spider-Verse, but very well may make his way, is right here flying through our display. Down here, we've got kind of a touching moment between a young Peter B. and a young Miles as they fly through, and then another mentor relationship with the Prowler and Miles as the Prowler from Across the Spider-Verse. Spot has so much potential as a villain, and both of the versions that we've gotten of his figure are available right there. We're going to move past the main display and look at some of our other Spider-Men from across the world, beginning with Japanese Spider-Man from the 1970s Japanese TV show, and then the Spider-Man from the 1970s TV movies on CBS. Spider-Woman is in here. We've got the Reverse Spider-Man from A Crazy Spidey Super Stories, and one of the more rare, one of the more wanted figures in my collection, the MTV animated Spider-Man. Up in the corner, you've got a video game Spider-Man, and you've got Spider-Man from the terrible Spider-Man Unlimited cartoon. Bad cartoon, great figure, looks terrific in the Spider-Verse. But the main players of the Spider-Verse are right here in this incredible flight display. You've got Spider-Man India with his string kind of bolo yo-yo weapon flying in. You have got our Japanese Spider-Man, and of course, Peter Porker, the Spectacular Spider-Ham. Miguel O'Hara coming crashing at you as Spider-Man 2099, but in the middle are our three main characters, Miles, Peter, and Gwen, all levitating above the scene. Spider-Man Noir and Scarlet Spider fill out the second row, and this Leopardon that I got on my trip to Japan comes in the back. But maybe my favorite part of this entire display is the Spider-Mobile with little mini-mate versions of Miles and Peter swinging through the city in the Spider-Mobile. There is nothing cooler than the Spider-Verse, and hopefully you guys appreciate all the work that went into this incredible Spider-Verse display. And finally, we have my homage to the history of Spider-Man through comics, my main 6-inch Spider-Man display. Now, I actually did an entire video on how I set this display up, but it's always changing. New figures are coming, new custom heads have become available, and this shelf has actually changed a little bit. So let's back up and go through it and look at what I consider the definitive Spider-Man display. Starting on the left-hand side, we go to the very beginning with Amazing Fantasy 15. Here is Steve Ditko's original design for Spider-Man, both as a Marvel legend and as a Toy Biz Marvel legend. Again, Spidey's wearing his black. He's got the really, really small eyepieces, and it just works. We've mentioned it several times, but Ditko is the one who came up with the half Peter, half Spidey mask, and we're utilizing a spider sense there to help really bring that out. And to get really into the details of it, this Amazing Spider-Man from Amazing Fantasy 15 actually has the blue spider on the back, just like what we saw in that miscolored original issue. So there is our origin of Spider-Man display, but Ditko wasn't done. He continued evolving, and his wall crawler became more athletic and more nimble, as you can see with this McFarlane statue of Ditko Spider-Man and this custom Mafex head with custom web wings underneath. Ditko always drew Spidey's soles facing the reader, so I had to get this figure into a position where his feet were up and facing us. Mezco, in their Silver Age 112 line, gave us what is almost the most perfect Ditko Spider-Man, but I got to admit some of these other ones that I have may be working better. Of course, John Romita Sr. took over the book after Ditko, and the retro Spider-Man here is one of the best representations of his art. I still think it's one of the best posing Spider-Men we've ever gotten. Of course, Romita Sr.'s classic covers were represented by McFarlane statues. You can see him here swinging on the Crisis on Campus issue, and yet another custom head on a custom Mafex figure with really, really classic Romita eyes. As Spidey entered the 1980s, he was swept up in the superhero Secret Wars, where he bonded with the Venom symbiote. And this look comes from the Mike Zeck and Ron Friends era of the black suit in the early 80s. But Todd McFarlane took that suit to a whole new level, expanding the eyes and increasing the agility and the spider-like nature of the character as he began to draw him. In fact, McFarlane was such a huge influence on the book. I've got several versions, including this brand new McFarlane corner box statue, as well as another Toy Biz McFarlane figure back in the back. Mark Bagley is perhaps the longest running artist on Amazing Spider-Man. Here's a look from his original run in the 1990s. And then this version is where he revolutionized the character alongside Brian Michael Bendis in Ultimate Spider-Man. This pose is supposed to directly represent the big-time superhero scene from Ultimate Spider-Man. I still have a soft spot for Pizza Spidey. I love the look of the mask up, and I love the smile on Spidey's face because I think that really represents his character and his personality. And then we've got our two versions of Ben Reilly, both as the Scarlet Spider and as the Spectacular Spider-Man. Both of these by Mafex, both of these absolute perfect action figures. There have been so many artists that have worked on the title that have had their artwork immortalized in plastic, like this version, which represents Humberto Ramos's Spider-Man with the huge delts, the giant feet and fingers, and the square head. Or this version by J. Scott Campbell, which has the distinctive upside-down Spider-Man logo on the chest, and again, exaggerated hands and feet, and those distinctive J. Scott Campbell eyes. Or Ryan Stegman's take on Superior Spider-Man, where Doc Ock took over Peter's body and became the Superior Spider-Man. But none of these figures would exist. None of this entire display would exist without the Spider-Man Classic Spider-Man. Yes, this is the figure that brought about a revolution in 6-inch action figures when it comes to sculpt, accuracy, and articulation. And last but not least, I have this figure, the first Mafex Spider-Man. It's a little bit comic-y, it's a little bit smooth, but I think it represents kind of all of these eras and brings this entire display together. There it is, the history of Spider-Man through his artist, all on one shelf. So what do you guys think? Is this the greatest Spider-Man display that you've ever seen? Let me know in the comments. Who did I leave out? Which of your favorite versions of the wall crawler didn't make the list? And as always, for the best in comics history and action figures, subscribe to Carbon Scoring.